Well, welcome everyone. If I can attempt to call you to order, I'm John Connor, CEO of the Climate Institute. It's great to have you all here today. I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the country upon which we meet and pay respect to elders past and present. Welcome again. This is the first Australian Divest Invest conference. And for those of you in the Twitterverse, that's hashtag Divest Invest AUS. So please mute your phones, but tweet away vigorously. Now, the organisers see this not just one day, rather this day and your involvement is part of a continuum. We want to build on the skills, the experiences and networks that is part of the phenomenon that's been the divestment movement. We also want to build on those skills, experience and networks that's in the emergent, some describe the civil economy movement, which is building an architecture of investor accountability and action. Both are shifting capital away from fueling more of our climate and pollution problems towards accelerating solutions, towards greater investment in a safer, more innovative and more genuine prosperity. This is the brainchild of Sue Matthews. Where are you, Sue? She's actually out waiting for at the back there. Sue Matthews waiting for Stephen Hines. And both the Mullum Trust and the Australian Environment Grantmakers Network, of which she's such a wonderful force of nature and leadership in. But today would not have been possible without the additional support of the Rockefeller Foundation, the International Divest Invest organisation, the English family, McKinnon family, Earth Welfare, Ross Knowles, Pace, Madden, Sainsbury and Diversicon foundations, as well as the Fairer Futures funds. Thank you. Nor would today have been possible without Philanthropy Australia and the Sydney University's United States State Study Centre, who brought out Stephen Hines and helped spread the word, as well as a range of industry associations and NGOs like 350.org, who've also helped us spread the word. And it has been great to work with Sue Matthews, Louise O'Halloran from AEGN, and Rebecca Wright, who's the conference manager / wrangler on the steering committee. Thank you all, and thank you, speakers and participants, for coming today. First, a couple of housekeeping. Toilets are down there and back out in that room. There's fire exits through the front doors, the doors there. Rush out there in a panic and out through to the front there and then go down the elevators and stairs out there. Now, before I introduce the conference today fully, I want to put up the only slide from me. And you'll get plenty of slides and numbers today. But I've one slide, and it's mostly about one number. That's a big, fat one, 0. This chart maps growing annual levels of heat-trapping carbon pollution that have come from the way we've used fossil fuels and the way we've used the land. There's now over 35 billion tonnes of CO2 being dumped into the atmosphere each year. Since the Industrial Revolution, that's a total of over 1.5 trillion tonnes of CO2, with just over half being absorbed in ocean and forest sinks. The rest has stayed up there. And CO2 stays up there for hundreds and hundreds of years, trapping more and more heat, pumping our weather systems with more and more steroids. Experts have modelled thousands of future pollution scenarios and their implications, and you can see them represented by all the grey lines, but you need to focus just on the orange and red. To keep global warming below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, it's clear that we need to get to zero net emissions minus the sinks, by around 2050. And then we need to continue on, removing CO2 through natural, technological and industrial sinks. But getting to zero must be our focus within the next few decades. In what should be a warning to those clinging to the status quo, this zero emissions objective has zoomed into the mainstream in the last 12 months. Our Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and Opposition Leader repeated it around Paris, and all nations endorsed it in the final agreement. But getting serious about net zero emissions has a flip side. We have a very limited budget of heat-trapping carbon pollution before we breach warming limits. We have to make it scarce And as if this graph shows, if we are serious, we need to make it peak and plunge rapidly. The Climate Institute is proud to have been asked to host this conference. Our 2050 vision is a resilient Australia prospering in a zero-carbon global economy while fully participating in international climate solutions. For over 10 years now, our focus has been on national policy, international trends, and on following the money in the investment community. From pioneering initiatives building climate-related transparency and skills within our Global Asset Owners Disclosure Project, to recent work led by Kate McKenzie highlighting financial system risks and requirements for solutions, our work in this area has been in part a hedge against the politics in a high-carbon economy that perhaps all too predictably went toxic, and too much remains toxic and troubled. Exhibit 2016 of that is the weekend's approval of the Adani coal mine in the Galilee, granted precisely as a vast trauma is being visited upon our Great Barrier Reef. This literally leaves investment decision makers as the last frontier against that mine's climate madness. Our work is also in part a recognition that there are a number of channels that can drive climate solutions: policy development, capital investment shifts, technological innovation, consumer preferences, and citizen actions all have roles to play. Some of these may surprise as more important than expected. Policy does not necessarily have to lead, and in a high-carbon political economy may need to be dragged there by citizens, consumers, and capital. It's an unholy trinity that Karl Marx may not have enjoyed, but it's the truth. Our work is driven by the view that there is a symbiotic relationship between public and private investment policy. While one might lead the other at various times, it is better that both are swiftly on song for the speedy but sustained transition we need. Investors must act, but Canberra must act. Today, we will focus predominantly on the burgeoning action and leadership, as well as the market disruption and chaos underway in the private investment sphere. There has to be more of each, and hopefully today will help with that. As the Prime Minister might have said, and as we'll explore today, we are living in exciting times. Firstly, in Paris, all countries agreed to a framework that is not perfect, but is historic in regularly ratcheting up accountability and action aimed at keeping warming not just at 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, but also in pursuing avoiding 1.5 degrees warming. Now, independent experts already tell us we're at about 1 degree and warming, and that getting warming back under 1.5 degrees by 2100 will require roughly the same scale of reduction needed to avoid 2 degrees in the 20s, but much faster reductions after that and even more carbon removal afterwards. The Paris Agreement provides unprecedented opportunities for other countries, citizens and investors to track national and international progress, opportunities we must maximise. Secondly, at Paris, the Financial Stability Board of the G20 signalled their deep concerns about climate-related risks to financial system and economic stability by establishing a special task force led by Michael Bloomberg. On Friday, that task force issued its first report saying that they will recommend disclosure frameworks not just for companies, but also for investors and asset managers. This is creating a new level of expectations of disclosure. It's changing market information and market conditions, not just those in those jurisdictions like France already making such disclosure mandatory. And I read on the way in that the Financial Services Council is actually recommending mandatory disclosure for companies here in Australia in the Senate inquiry to date. This will mean more and more of your communities' investment strategies and risk assumptions will be made naked. Now, with apologies to our international guests, but in the words of Australian sports commentators HG and Roy, there's going to be a lot more nuding up. It may not be pretty at first, but let's get ready for it. Thirdly, there's been a phenomenal escalation of activity from philanthropists, investors and NGOs as we lay down historic markers in the urgent quest to civilise, if not democratise, capital. The task is urgent if we are to avoid the tragedy of the horizons, as dubbed by that radical greenie, the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney. the extraordinary growth of the divestment movement that's catapulted from $50 billion to over $3.4 trillion in just over 12 months is a vital but not full part of that. And finally, there's been a remarkable transition in the costs and innovations of the technologies that can make the goal of net zero emissions and below possible. The stunning performance of the Tesla Model 3 launch is just the latest and snazziest example of this. But as we will see today, wind and solar innovations have already been driving significant market disruption. In countries like Australia, the full potential of these innovations and solutions is being stymied by a system of cheap-to-operate, ageing and inefficient power plants. We need a plan for the orderly and sustained transition to the excitement and clean energy innovations so necessary and so increasingly affordable. But despite this excitement, we are also witnessing confronting and challenging reality of global warming, whose annual global averages are already over 1 degree above pre-industrial levels. Localised temperature differences have already been recorded at 6, 7, 8 degrees and more above averages, highlighting that the need for action is now. The roof of our world, the heat-reflecting polar ice cap, has suffered the warmest winter on record, is at its lowest level ever, and summer is coming. Our Fijian neighbours have just experienced some of the fastest winds ever faced by humanity. Extreme weather is smacking the poor and politically unstable regions in the Middle East, Africa and across Asia. And overnight, a report from the London School of Economics has warned global financial assets of $2.5 trillion, possibly as much as $24 trillion, are at risk from climate change. In Australia, this is also driving real and present impacts. We can argue about the proportion of our contribution to the problem, 1 or 2% of global pollution. We're still in the top 20. But our interests lie in the fact that we experience almost all of the climate impacts, and they are visited upon Australia. Rising sea levels, extreme rainfall, record bushfire weather seasons in intensity and extent, drought and ocean acidification. We get just about the lot. The epic fail that is the bleaching of our corals, perhaps just witnessed by our keynote speaker at Lizard Island, is another example of the real and present risks to our social and economic as well as environmental infrastructure and to our way of life. So there are reasons to be terrified, but there are reasons to be optimistic. Let us get on with how we can use our investments, our networks and our nows to minimise the risks and maximise the opportunities. We need to fight those putting our future at risk, but we must also build bridges to the future we want. Now, collectively, we've tried to design this conference to make it as interactive and engaging as possible and to advance the knowledge and networks within particular sectors of the investment community. Great contributions have already been made by philanthropists, churches, local governments, universities, as well as those in the broader investment community. Let's broaden and deepen those advances today and in time to come. We're going to start first. We had actually hoped to have Rachel Kite, former Vice President of the World Bank. We've got a video, but we've had some technical problems with that, so I have to apologise for that. But that will be available on our website and the resources there. But so first we'll start with some fast but vital facts for investors. We'll then hear from our international guest and take 2 plenary sessions going deeper into the divestment and investment best practice. In the afternoon, you can dig deeper into those elements or explore the frontiers of fiduciary duty and advocacy in concurrent sessions. We'll be splitting open this room into 2 parts. After that, we are very keen for you to divide into relevant groups to engage with some visual and technical materials that we have provided. One of those we have as a prompt is there on your table, that discussion guide on getting to zero. That's there as we want to build work and build case studies and experience in key sectors. So really keen that you stay and participate in those sessions. And we have a cracking final plenary session for you. Don't miss that. Well, with Dr. Hewson and a panel of respondents to conclude the day, followed by some networking.